Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We are in 1 Peter chapter 3. We'll be finishing verse 6 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them. And thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, we saw last lesson in verse 6, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And we saw last lesson that it was a continuous thing. It was in the imperfect tense, meaning that even as Sarah, it wasn't a one-time obedience, but it was a day-by-day continuous obedience to Abraham and a continuous calling him Lord. Not Lord as in the sense of that he was master over her and she was a slave. No, but that she honored the office of the family brought down by God, that Abraham was the head of the home. And because of that, she would honor him as the head of the home. And in return, Abraham would give her tremendous honor as God has brought her to him to be his helpmeet in life. All right? So he says here as we continue on, whose daughters ye are as long as ye do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. Now, he says here, whose daughters you are as long as you do well. And the Greek word for daughters here is teknon, and it means a child or children. And, as Abraham is the father of our faith, and if we live by faith, then we have Abraham as our father. Isn't that true? Abraham is the father of our faith. And if we live by faith, then we can claim Abraham as our father, okay? Spiritually speaking. So also, Sarah is the mother of obedience. And if a woman obeys her husband, then she has Sarah as her mother. So as Abraham is the father of our faith, Sarah is the mother of our obedience. All right? Now, I was reading in one of the commentaries, and I thought it was very good, and I wanted to share it with you. This commentator said, he said, it's kind of a shame how there's no, and the commentary was written many, many years ago. It's a shame that churches don't have any, he called it like Daughters of Sarah societies or Sons of Abraham societies. And I understood what he meant when he wrote that. And, it's you go, and I've seen this in other churches, that there are a lot of things going on in churches that are set up for women, but there's not really a lot of things set up for men. Now, if your church has a lot of organizations or a lot of activities that are set specifically for men, that's great. But in many churches, and it's kind of a shame that it doesn't happen, and I'm saying that it happens everywhere, that in the average church, there are a lot more things going on for women than there are specifically for men. And it's just the way it is. And really, as he says here, that Sarah is the mother of obedience, there should be, in a sense. And I thought about that for a while, and I thought, what? It would be great for a church to have a group for women that is a daughters of Sarah, right? Or you could say daughters of Hannah, right? Or daughters of Leah. And it would be a get-together, like, that the pastor would say on a Sunday, this coming Wednesday evening, we're having our monthly Daughters of Sarah meeting, all right? And it would be where women get together and they can pray and pray together, and they can have maybe have the pastor come and share, or have somebody come and share the Word of God, and it would be great. It would be great. And I thought also there really isn't a lot going on in churches specifically for men, and I think it's a shame, because men are almost viewed as being, life is too busy for them, and we don't want to bother men, and they're watching football or baseball or whatever, and we, but I'm telling you, there is a tremendous need in churches for men. There's the average church doesn't have specific times when just men can get together and pray, where just men can get together and do something, go soul winning, or go to the homeless in your city and serve, or do something, some kind of an outreach, something where they can get together and pray and hear the Word of God together, just as men. And you could name it the Sons of Abraham, a group. It could be once a month, once a week, whatever, on a Saturday or whatever. But it would be great for that, and because men need it. Men need to get together and pray and get together and do something, and you can have the Word of God and be involved in things together as men. Go on outreach or do something. Be involved in some kind of vision. And again, he says here, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. And he says here, are not afraid with any amazement. This Greek word for amazement is ptoesis, all right? And it means terror. And, although there are several views of interpretation on this part here about being not being afraid with any amazement, I've read a number of commentaries, and there are several views of how to interpret this verse. The general view is that as long as these believing Jewish wives love and submit to their husbands, that there should be no reason for them to be afraid or to be in terror of their husbands. And this is what Peter is saying, is that now, are there exceptions to the rule? Of course. There are husbands who are insecure, and they're power hungry, and they're authoritative at home. And of course, there always are exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, Peter is saying, as long as you do well, there's no reason to fear your husband. And even if your husband is not a believer, and he's saying here that as long as you love your husband and you obey and submit to your husband, and as long as if you have children, you love your kids and you take care of them, and you go out and buy the food and get the clothes and things, and you're a proper wife, generally speaking, there's no reason to be in terror of your husband. And again, as I said, there's always an exception to the rule. But we're speaking here, Peter is speaking in generalities, that as long as you do well and are not afraid with any amazement, there's as long as you do well, there's no reason to fear your husband. Does this mean that it'll never happen? No. But if the wife loves and submits to her husband, generally there's no reason to fear her husband. And I think that this is what Peter is trying to encourage, is that even with unsaved husbands, they can, maybe they reject the gospel and they don't want to hear the word of God from you anymore. But as long as they see that you love him and you love your children, if you have children, you're providing and you're honoring the husband as the head of the home, that it will be well with you. All right? So he says in verse 6, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as you do well, and you're not afraid with any amazement. All right? And we'll pick this up in verse 7. Now we get into the men's part, the husband's part, in verse 7. All right? Until then, though, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.